Hi, I'm Ted Campbell from Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, and I want to welcome you to this video series and study series on early Methodist history. Whether you're studying by yourself or in a group, we want to encourage you to do a couple of things. First, read the materials that have been provided in addition to these lectures. And secondly, participate in online discussion groups that are being provided as well. Now, join me for this short course in Methodist history. Methodist people know John Wesley as the founder of our religious tradition. He's known as a church reformer, an anti-slavery activist, a purveyor of homespun medical remedies, and one of the pioneers of electric shock therapy. John Wesley was born in 1703 and died in 1791, so his life spanned the 18th century, and he was very much a man of his era. He was born in a time of peace that followed a century of war between social classes, between rival forms of economy, between political parties, between urban and rural areas, and between rival expressions of the Christian faith. He was born into a family for whom these national and cultural and religious divisions were very much family issues. His grandfathers on both sides had been dissenting ministers, that is, strongly Protestant clergy who were not part of the Church of England. His father Samuel Wesley and his mother Susanna Ansley had differentiated themselves from their own parents by identifying themselves with the Church of England, the national church that had been established in the 1500s. I think his surname was really pronounced more like Wesley, the way Americans pronounce it, not Wesley, because when people received letters from him, they often wrote his name on the letter as they heard it, and they very often spelled it W-E-S-T-L-E-Y, and I think that means they heard the hissing S sound and not the buzzing Z sound in his name. We know that John Wesley's parents had temporarily separated from each other sometime in early 1702, when Samuel discovered that Susanna would not say amen to the daily prayer for the reigning monarch. Susanna had apparently come to have reservations about the legitimacy of King William of Orange. Samuel was seriously upset about this. He wrote to a friend that he had told his wife, "If we have two kings, we must have two beds." Susanna, who would give birth to 18 or 19 children, may have been relieved, but her relief would not have lasted long. King William died in March of 1702 and was succeeded by Queen Anne, the daughter of the deposed King James II. Her succession to the throne apparently led to a reconciliation between Samuel and Susanna Wesley. John Wesley was born 15 months later, in June 1703. John Wesley spent his earliest years in the remote Lincolnshire village of Epworth, where his father served as priest of the parish church. The Wesley family lived with a high level of culture in Epworth. Every child, girls and boys, was taught to read, and the boys and girls were eventually taught Latin and Greek. The family had domestic servants in Epworth, but despite this, there's evidence that they were materially poor. Samuel Wesley had been jailed for his debts. The house in which the Wesleys lived was burned in a fire in February 1709 when John Wesley was 5 years old. John was trapped in an upstairs room, and men made a human ladder to rescue him. John Wesley lived with his family in Epworth until he was 11 years old. Then, in 1714, he went to London to be a student at Charterhouse School. Charterhouse School was a private institution housed in a medieval Carthusian monastery. The schoolboys lived in the monks' cells. They took their meals together in the monastic refectory. They studied in the library the school had inherited from the monastery, and they worshiped together in the school's medieval chapel. John Wesley would live most of his life in an academic or religious community. Only his first 11 years and then a few years with his wife in the 1750s and in the 1770s were lived in a family home. From Charterhouse, John Wesley entered Oxford University in 1720, matriculating in Christ Church, the largest of the Oxford colleges. Like Charterhouse and the older Oxford colleges, Christ Church had been founded as a monastic institution, and even after the Reformation, the Oxford colleges continued to insist that faculty members should be unmarried. John Wesley loved Oxford. He would say later in life that he had hoped to spend his career inter silvas academiae, among the groves of academia. That was not going to happen, but Oxford was the setting for his earliest aspirations for religious reform. In 1725, he decided to seek ordination as a priest of the Church of England. His parents were delighted and both sent long lists of books they wanted him to study in preparation for holy orders. In that year, he was ordained as a deacon, the office in preparation for becoming a priest. In the next year, John Wesley was elected a fellow, that means a permanent faculty member, of the very finest of the Oxford colleges, Lincoln College. The position in Lincoln College provided John Wesley with a salary contingent upon his fulfilling his teaching responsibilities. In the same year as John Wesley became a fellow of Lincoln College, his younger brother Charles Wesley came to Oxford and matriculated at Christ Church. Their father, Samuel Wesley, requested John's help at Epworth, so John paid someone to take his teaching responsibilities temporarily and spent most of the years 1727 to 1729 in Epworth. He did return to Oxford in September 1728, where he was ordained as a priest by the Bishop of Oxford, John Potter, who later became Archbishop of Canterbury. John Wesley returned to Oxford and assumed his teaching responsibilities in 1729. From this year, he dated the origin of a religious society in which he and his brother Charles participated. This religious society was patterned after other religious societies that had been a popular form of religious renewal in the British Isles since the latter decades of the 1600s. Samuel and Susanna Wesley, in fact, had cultivated a small religious society like this in Epworth. The members of the Oxford group visited the sick, the poor, and people in Oxford's jails. One jail was located in the dank keep or crawl space below the Oxford Castle. I've actually gone crawling around down there. Another jail was located over the old North Gate to the city, adjacent to the Church of St. Michael at the North Gate. The theology that drove their good works was not exactly works righteousness, but was a variation of Protestant theology. This theological outlook maintained that we're justified by grace through faith, but we will not be given the gifts of faith and grace until we've done everything in our power. It's really very similar to the late medieval Catholic views that Luther found to be a practical equivalent of works righteousness or Pelagianism. The Oxford group was given a variety of deprecating names like Bible moths and sacramentarians, but the name that stuck was Methodists.